Okay, we'd like to call to order the Town of Niskayuna Planning Board and Zoning Commission, June 9th, 2025 meeting. Ms. Bergami, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Lefbaum,
Here.
Ms. Strain,
Here.
Ms. Belofsky,
Here.
Ms. Gomes,
Here.
Ms. Gold,
Present.
Mr. Millspa,
Here.
Mr. Bellin-Calhoun,
Here.
Chairman Dorpino.
Here. Next up is the approval of the May 19th, 2025 meeting minutes. May I get a motion?
I'll move that they be approved.
Moved by Ms. Belowski. Second by Ms. Strang. Any comments or corrections? I had none. Okay. All in favor of the May 19th, 2025 meeting minutes, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Next up is public hearings. We have no scheduled public hearings, so we'll open up privilege of the floor. Privilege of the floor is open for any resident of Niskayuna that would like to talk about any planning or zoning matter. Please approach the podium and state your name and address for the record. Okay, since no one here is approaching the podium and no correspondence, last call. Okay, privilege of the floor is closed. There's no unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business. First up is a resolution 2025-15, Momentive, a resolution for site plan approval for the demolition of an existing building at 2750 Balltown Road. This is a new application with no project lead. We're going to do this a little bit differently with the order. Usually we read the resolution first, but since this is a tentative resolution, I would like to open it up to discussion first and introduce the project. So if we have anyone here that's representing the applicant, please state your name.
Good evening. For the record, Karen Majanowski with Bowler Engineering, the civil site engineer for this project. And I'm here this evening with Joshua Spain from Momentive, Eric Svan from SGA, the architect for the project, and James Kehoe from Consigli, the contractor for the project.
Okay, thank you.
The subject parcel, as you can see here, outlined in orange, is 2750 Balltown Road in the town and is the current site and home of Momentive. They were here a couple years ago for approval for a change of tenant and have been owning and occupying this property ever since. Looking to make some improvements and adaptations for their business and operations. So we're here this evening for site plan review related to demolition on the property. This exhibit here shows the areas of the building that we're proposing to demolish. As you can see, and as you're probably familiar, everything is set back very far from the road, about 1,000 feet. And so what we're looking to do with this demolition is all within the center of the existing buildings and really no visibility to the road. So we've outlined here in red the portions of the building that have been found to be unfit for remodel and really not needed. And looking to remove those now to be in line with the project schedule and receive hopefully approval for the demolition of these components. The square footage is about 23,000 square feet that they'd be looking to remove. And again, these are older portions of the building, so wouldn't really be feasible for remodel and reuse. And for most of them, they're currently not using most of the areas that you see here. In the future, any proposed improvements and or additions to the facility would be in a smaller scope and scale. So looking to remove that square footage and then later propose some additional square footage. But the reason we're doing this now is you do have a mechanism for site plan review for demolition. So just to fit with the schedule of things, that's where we're at from a demolition standpoint. And then lastly, we were asked to share just briefly what the future might hold for this. So as I mentioned, they would need additional area for their facility to kind of replace what was there before. Again, keeping the scope of that smaller square footage than what was there today, because there's simply just more space than they would need. So this shows consolidating what was previously three wings that connect what is the east and the west. So this portion here would remain. This is what I'm referring to as the east. And then this would be the west here. And everything we're proposing to remove was in this center area. So still working on plans for the future, but this just gives a high level view of what that might look like later, and why we're here this evening for demolition. Did also want to mention that what is here on the west and east to remain would be renovated. Those are portions of the building that were found suitable to be reused and renovated. And there might be improvements up in this front lobby area for a new lobby suite type scenario moving forward. But here simply this evening for site plan review for the demolition component of the project.
Okay, thank you for the recap.
Thank you.
So just so we can orient ourselves, the building obviously is the backside, or considered like the backside from Balltown Road, correct? Not visible from where you can drive by.
Right, so the road would be here,
Mhm.
and then this portion remains. So everything proposed to be demolished in red would be behind that front building.
No other alterations to the site work. There was nothing else on the plan that indicated parking lots to be dismantled, landscaping changes, utility removals.
So everything that was submitted on our demolition plan is within that general area. It shows our limit of work and disturbance. So in removing some utilities, they're all generally around that perimeter of those existing buildings. Parking lots will remain. Some minor work to be done in the future with ADA parking and things, but everything is generally around or within 50 feet of those existing buildings.
All right, open it up to board discussion.
Why is it that none of this space to be demolished cannot be remodeled or reused?
That was evaluated. These are the older parts of the building that are there from, I believe, the 1960s, and it just wasn't suitable to keep them. They're not in use now either, for that reason.
Why not suitable? Are they unsound or?
Not unsound, it's just the effort to go through rehabbing those. This has to be evaluated against what they need for the space. So the configuration today, with those three kind of long shapes to the building, as you see, is just a layout and more room than they need. The layout doesn't really work for them, so we're consolidating it all into one mass in the center with the proposed replacement in the future.
How far in the future?
So they're hopeful to do demolition this year, and then we would hopefully see you again before the year end with any new plans.
I wasn't here, I wasn't on the board when the initial plan was proposed, so given the age you indicated of what's being demolished, are there any concerns in terms of the demolition? Like the materials or what's in the
So
labs?
there will be full studies and abatement done.
Mhm.
Everything will follow proper procedures as far as that goes, and that will all be handled prior to demolition.
So there's no knowledge of hazardous materials there now, such as asbestos? Because it's really late for the asbestos to have been used on site.
have to come up to the podium if you could. So we can hear the recording of everything that's spoken. Thanks.
James Kehoe with Consigli Construction. There has been a full survey done by a company called Quest of all the asbestos containing materials in the areas slated for demolition.
Are there materials?
Asbestos containing
Yeah.
materials, there are asbestos containing materials, yes. And all of that will be abated before the buildings come down.
Yeah, so just part of the building permit process is that they provide a asbestos-free kind of certificate
Yep.
as part of the demolition permit. So they do the asbestos removal before they get a demolition permit. That's normal.
Is there a lot of asbestos? Because it really is late for for asbestos to have been used in the construction.
So these buildings were put up in 1960, so quite a while ago. Yeah.
That's about when it was being phased out.
Okay.
The only other thing I'd mention, Andrew mentioned this to me, I updated your packets. You do have the environmental assessment form because the demolition is so minor for a site plan review, it didn't have time to go to the CAC. So if you guys just look through your packets, there was the first part of the EAF. I drafted the second part, which basically, because the demolition is within the two buildings and it's not changing impervious surface and it's not impacting flora and fauna and it's not impacting utilities and everything because it's demolition. I entered no to small impact, but we could go through that if you guys wanted to discuss any of it further. Or add any specific findings to the part 3.
Okay.
We don't normally have a resolution on a project that hasn't even been presented. What's driving this?
Yeah, it's because our next meeting is almost a month and a half from now. And based on, we've been actually meeting with Momentive fairly regularly, and we knew that it was coming. But unfortunately, it hit on that big gap between meetings. And I think for their schedules, and because it's a simple demolition, that we put it on for resolution.
But it seems to be part of a larger plan and we're only getting part of it up front.
That's true. Yep, and that's why we asked for them to put an idea of what's happening there. But you can see that everything that they're looking at is all within the space of those two buildings. And, you know, demolition it's a pretty simple process with the building department, so.
No, I was just going to ask if there were any infrastructure, utility, water, any changes to the services in?
There are none proposed. We looked at that. So the benefit of this as well is that all of the existing utilities that are there around this general area where the buildings are can be used to continue to feed the buildings that are there and connect anything in the future that needs to be within the building itself.
Were there any, just out of curiosity, were there any climate smart or green initiatives that might be going along with the changes? to
In the new
facility?
building,
Yeah. And
within the building itself,
just in
correct?
general, just is, it's a pretty big piece of land and there's lots of, changes that are occurring in design. So I just thought I'd ask the question up front.
Sure.
Hi, Eric Spahn from SGA Architects, architect on the project. We look forward to being as sustainable as possible, certainly with the new mechanical system and the fume hoods that are required for the research laboratories will be a state-of-the-art equipment. We have not done like a LEED scorecard, but we are looking and working with Momentive. They do have a global initiative in terms of their corporate standards and where they want to advance and champion sustainability. So we look to do that. And can't say that I have all the metrics. at
Too
the
early,
moment,
yeah.
But the corporation has a plan and we're anxious to follow that.
Great, thanks.
Any other comments or thoughts?
You said that currently those three sections are not being used?
In the center.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and then is to make one large structure in the middle? Is there like, a reason, like, is there gonna be now like an increase in staffing or increase in like your project loads? I was just wondering what was like the motivation? If it's not,
Sure.
not currently being used.
Sure. So they don't need as much square footage as there. So it will be one central area, but of lesser square footage than is there. And will be brand new, state of the art. And then the plan is that some employees from other locations would be working there.
Is the bottom line that it would be cheaper to construct new than to maybe combine two of those spaces?
So again, the way they're laid out today, the configuration doesn't work because they are all separate spaces. They're just looking to have one common working space. So if we were to just keep one, it wouldn't be big enough, but all three is too much. It's just the configuration doesn't work.
But you could join two buildings, knock out a wall on one and the opposite one on the other and get space. There's some reason that's not practicable.
The technology of the research and the spaces that are needed in which to conduct that are changed over time. And so we are looking to create some bigger spaces for bigger equipment. And also the way the model works is that the clients, the customers come in and they want to see the labs that are going to where the research for the product that they are asking for are going to be done. So in order to do that in a safe way, we can't bring them into the labs, but we can create a larger building with a corridor where the customer still can come in and safely look into the lab and understand what they're asking Momentive to research and to do. So it's a business change, business model, and it's also just different equipment of today and laying it out in a safe manner for both the employee and the customer.
Is the height inadequate?
We hope to keep the height within almost the same, but it's just a little bit taller. And again, that deals with the ductwork and the amount of equipment and the ventilation that we need to provide at the fume hoods and at the equipment.
Still mulling it over, sorry.
I think it's great that you're remediating the asbestos issue and starting from scratch. I think it's a good plan.
So just so we can kind of talk as a board for schedule wise, it is a little bit out of character for us to, see something for the first time and have a resolution on that. It is a demo permit. I know that a lot of demo permits do come through the building department that we don't see. This is a larger commercial building. That's why it's here. So with the schedule that we have, since we only have one meeting in June, I believe one option would be is to call for a special meeting to have a second one in June, correct? Because early voting was rescheduled. So there is the opportunity to do that if the board chooses to do that, or we could discuss if it's premature to read the resolution tonight and vote on it, or we could go forward with it tonight too. So
I would be in favor of another meeting. I'm not comfortable making a decision on such short notice without all the facts.
what additional information would you be looking for, Leslie?
That's what I'm still mulling.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think if it's permissible for us to grant the resolution without a full plan being presented, which it sounds like it is, right? This is step one, and then the plan for what's going to go there will be later on. Correct.
Correct. The application is for the demolition only. As a courtesy, they've included what the
Preliminary.
preliminary plans are. That could change, obviously. We could see something vastly different in a future application, but I think this is just trying to give you the big picture of what they're intending to do. So
I think the applicant has explained why the need is
Mhm.
there, and I would be comfortable getting the ball rolling because I think the ultimate end result is a positive one.
I agree.
Yeah, agreed.
don't think it's missing anything, right? It's pretty clear that the applicant is requesting a demolition, you know. So I think it's a whole package for that piece.
I'm in agreement with that also. So I think what we're going to do at this point is I'm going to make a motion to bring forth resolution 2025-15, a resolution for site plan approval for the demolition of an existing building at 2750 Balltown Road. Before I ask for a second, I'll just ask the applicant, you've had a chance to see the resolution, correct?
Correct.
Did you have any issues with any of the items in there?
We did not.
All right. May I get a second?
A second?
Okay, second by Mr. Laflamme. Now therefore be it hereby resolved that this Planning Board and Zoning Commission does hereby classify this application as an unlisted action under seeker regulations, and by it hereby further resolved that this Planning Board and Zoning Commission hereby determine that this project will not have a significant effect on the environment and hereby directs the town planner to file a negative seeker declaration. And be it hereby further resolved that the Planning Board and Zoning Commission finds the above referenced site plan meets the requirements of the zoning code and previous site plan approvals, and therefore hereby approves this site plan with the following conditions. 1, prior to site disturbance, the applicant shall participate in a pre-construction meeting with the town of Niskayuna and shall address any concerns raised by the town or the town designated engineer. 2, prior to the pre-construction meeting, A, any engineering concerns will be addressed to the satisfaction of the town superintendent of water, sewer, and engineering. B, any questions or concerns raised by the town designated engineer will be addressed by the applicant in a formal letter to the town. C, any minor changes to the final site plans will be addressed to the satisfaction of the town planning department. 3, prior to site disturbance, the plan shall be modified to reflect agreed upon decisions of pre-construction meeting, if any, and the disturbed as required for the town. Final site plan shall be submitted to the town labeled final demolition plan. And 4, in accordance with chapter 180 of the Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Ordinance of the town of Niskayuna, the applicant shall be put in place soil erosion and sediment control measures sufficient to stabilize disturbed areas. These measures shall be satisfactory to the superintendent of water, sewer, and engineering and shall remain in place until such time as the natural vegetation has successfully been established. Ms. Bergami, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Laflamme,
Aye.
Ms. Strain,
Aye.
Ms. Bilofsky,
Aye.
Ms. Gomes,
Aye.
Ms. Gold,
Present.
Are you abstaining or are you going to?
I'm saying present. I feel the board is taking inadequate time to consider this. Question may occur because we didn't get information until this meeting.
Okay.
So I am voting present, and that is accepted.
For purposes of the resolution, it'll count as a not in favor.
Thank you.
A nay. Record it as a present in the minutes. We'll go from there.
Thank you.
Mr. Belen Calhoun,
Aye.
Chairman Darpino.
Aye, the resolution passes.
Thank you.
It's a very poor precedent.
Next up is a resolution 2025-17 GE Vernova, a resolution for site plan approval for new signage at 2690 Balltown Road. I will be recusing myself and Ms. Bilofsky will be chairing this one item.
So I think the applicant is present, so you could step forward. Thanks. So just a quick review for the record. At the May 19th meeting, we voted 7-0 that the addition of that, I believe it was 6th sign, is that right? Did not change our May 5th recommendation to the ZBA, which was to approve the signage. 2 days later, on the 21st, at their regularly scheduled meeting, the zoning board granted the variances as requested. So the next step for our planning board is to take action on the resolution for approval. Are there any questions from the board or any information from the applicant that we should be aware of?
Nothing's changed on our end.
Pretty straightforward. Okay, so I'll read the resolution. Is that correct? Yeah. Oh, yes. First, I need a motion. It's my first time. Can I have a motion to approve the resolution? Second?
Second.
Thanks. Did I read it right? Now therefore be it hereby resolved that this planning board and zoning commission does hereby classify this application as an unlisted action under seeker regulation, and by it hereby further resolved that this planning board and zoning commission hereby determined that this project will not have a significant effect on the environment, and hereby directs the town planner to file a negative seeker declaration, and be it hereby further resolved that the planning board and zoning commission finds the above referenced site plan meets the requirements of the zoning code and therefore hereby approves this signage site plan. Ms. Bergami, will you call the roll?
Mr. Laflamme?
Aye.
Ms. Strain?
Aye.
Ms. Bilofsky?
Aye.
Ms. Gomes?
Aye.
Ms. Gold?
Aye.
Mr. Bill and Calhoun?
Aye.
You're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you. Resolution passes. Thanks, Ms. Bilofsky. Okay. Next up, under new business is the recommendation to the ZBA for 1079 Balltown Road. This is Niskuna Fire Department number 1. A recommendation for a new shed. We do not have a project lead, so I will chair this one. And I believe Ms. Bilofsky will have to recuse herself on this item. Do we have a representative from the applicant either online or here?
No, he wasn't able to make it tonight. He's going to attend the zoning board meeting. So I'll just go over the documents that were submitted in the packet. Niskuna Fire District number 1 on Balltown Road is requesting to add a shed to their property. They went back and forth with our attorneys for quite a while on whether or not they had zoning immunity on this and were being conservative. But one of the things we have to look at when they're putting the accessory structures up is, you know, the distance to the lot line, and it's 7 feet, so that needs a area variance. So the shed is pretty small. It's 12 by 14. It would be in the back of the fire station down a pretty steep hill where no one can see it. And they need that because they have really run into issues storing their lawnmowers and their snow blowers. So they want to put it in the shed there.
And they used to have one.
Did they? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, you could actually see it, at least in winter.
Oh, even though it was behind the building?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you're driving up the hill, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it's even in the similar spot. They have a generator there that's pretty big, and they're lining the shed up with the generator.
I'm glad you had the clarification on, I was going to ask if they had immunity as far as the,
So they have limited immunity. And, you know, sometimes we go back and forth with them on signage and things like that. But they did finally agree to bring the shed forward, even if it was an agree to disagree. So,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, the picture of the shed that was included in the package, it's a very modest sized shed. It's 8 foot by 12, single door. It's next to the generator. There is a tree line on the backside that would back up to the houses that are off of basically Cornelius to in that hillside neighborhood area.
I don't see any impact on the neighborhood. And going on Balltown, most of the time, you're never going to notice it.
Yeah. So it's really hard to see in the aerial, but it's this little scribbled area here. See that there?
Yeah, the map is a little difficult to read, but it's on
Yeah.
that back corner of the building.
And it will get notification to all the adjacent property owners for the zoning board, so they'll get a chance to say how they feel about it too.
Yeah. It may be visible. Honestly, those houses are right there, but they'll have an opportunity.
At the zoning board, yes.
Just other clarifications, I believe that there isn't any electrical or lighting, no utilities being run to this. This is just simply a shed, whether that's put on some gravel or skids, something like that would be pretty appropriate. I didn't see a concrete pad or anything permanent that was going to be part of this, so it's just an accessory structure.
And they do need to maintain the pavements because, gee, they need to serve a good portion of the town. And we wouldn't want their lawn to go unmowed.
Yeah, and
They're very visible that way.
the Vinnie Daly, the representative from the fire district that's taking this forward, said they can't move the new shed towards the building because they have to maintain the ability to drive behind for fire access,
Mhm.
actually. So, irony.
All right, so I think this is pretty straightforward. We'll go through the recommendations to the zoning board, unless there's any other comments or concerns. Okay, so first up is the effect on the comprehensive plan. I would move to say that there is none. Accessory structures are permitted use in the town. All in agreement, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. Suitability of use, I would say it's suitable for the reason that the accessory structures will hold non-life safety items that the fire department needs. This is typical just outdoor maintenance items. The location is behind the building and not visible from Balltown Road. And it's also screened from adjacent neighbors in the back by the wood line for the majority of the year. Okay. All in favor, state by saying aye. For
Aye.
suitability.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And then the recommendation would be to recommend it to the ZBA for approval to add the shed. Okay. All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So those are the recommendations. So that concludes our new business. We're going to move on to discussion items. First up is 3900 State Street, site plan application requiring an area variance and special use permit for building expansion, new signage and merging with 25 and 17 South Fagan Ave with the expansion of a parking lot.
I'm back.
This is back.
Was it,
All right.
Devin?
Yes. So for the record, Devin Dickinson with CHA Consulting here on behalf of Matthews Kia. Okay, so another iteration of this site plan. I'll kind of walk you through some of the changes that we made, and then, you know, my intent tonight is really just to have this discussion and see if this is something that's favorable and we can move forward. So we are proposing some stacked parking on the dealership parcel on South Fagan, closest to State Street. That was one of the comments that was brought up. So it's something we looked at. We looked at the grades. We looked at where that highway right-of-way boundary is, and we feel that it's something we can do relatively easily, which is a big windfall for Matthews to gain some parking there. The other thing we did is in the parking lot itself, we removed the parking islands and consolidated the parking. We also added some stack parking, as you see right there, trying to maximize our parking spaces while ultimately pulling the, overall development closer to State Street. Those are the big changes. Some of the smaller things that I did is I did shrink that entrance onto South Fagan. I actually pulled the planned north side closer to State Street so I could narrow it a little bit, get a little further from 26th South Fagan. That's across the street. A couple other minor things. We added the landscaping back in for the reconditioning lot, and I included the truck turning movements for a car carrier. And I show it coming in on South Fagan, going through the lot in the dealership, and then out onto State Street. I believe that was a preferable path that we discussed at the last meeting.
So
And I think that's it as far as changes go.
stacked parking, just to clarify, the first car in has to wait for the second car in to move to get out, right?
So there are, if it was a parking lot for a business, that's obviously not a preferred method. And I try to steer clear of it, but ultimately, it is a dealership. I don't see it not being a dealership anytime in the near future. So I think in an instance like this, it does work. It's more about, getting the cars on the lot as opposed to having, obviously it's all designed for the 9x18 spaces, but that's not really what they need. They need to just get cars on the lot. So stacking is a viable way to do that. Like you've probably all been on dealer lots. They get 10 in white and 10 in red, and they don't all need to be accessible. They can stack some in the back and pull them as they need the inventory.
Does the change to the design of the lot to the south change the application for the zoning board of appeals?
Yeah, so that's probably something that I should have mentioned, Chris. Yes, thank you. So in this new configuration, we are proposing a compliant lot and would no longer need the variance. The only item for discussion, which I would still advocate for, is there's that little shed they set on the end of the driveway, which is falling in. I would just remove that, and then you remove any type of need for a setback there.
So there's no lot line adjustment in the picture?
We would still do a lot line adjustment, except it would be compliant with all the zoning code for the R2 zone.
So as a clarification to that, the street frontage would be compliant. And it's still a trapezoidal shop?
So I
Correct?
narrowed it a little bit in the back, but
Okay.
it's wider than I originally proposed. Ultimately, I need some room to do some stormwater treatment.
Yeah.
And that really kind of drove, that balance. Obviously, we're trying to maximize the number of cars they can get in here while also balancing, impact to the residential neighborhood, and still fit stormwater and landscaping and buffering and all that.
Okay.
Is that tree that is close to the 6-foot high stockade fence arrow?
Mm-hmm.
Is that an existing tree or is that a new tree?
That is the spruce tree.
That's the spruce tree. Okay, got it.
Devin, can you give me an estimate of, with this configuration of this now, sort of how much more by feet that you've pulled it back towards State Street? Do you know a rough idea?
On Fagan, it's
Yeah, in Fagan, it's definitely at least 30 feet
30
because we
Yeah.
started at the 50, we've gone to the 80.
Okay.
I've always had stormwater in the back there,
Mhm.
so it's hard to quantify that.
Okay.
I've kind of broken it into two different, potential basins now. But it's probably a smaller magnitude, maybe 15 or 20 feet.
Okay.
But it's certainly something I could quantify, just not on the spot.
I appreciate the improvements to the plan. I will note that one neighbor came to the public hearing and complained about a mess, like an old sink that was on the property. And I remember seeing it when we were there for the site.
Yeah,
visit.
when we were at the site
Has
visit,
that
something
been
on the site
removed
plan.
yet?
I don't know. I would assume so. I can't answer that because I haven't been over that way again since our site visit. From my understanding, I'm not sure where that sink came from because Vinny was on that site visit and he said it wasn't there. So I'm not sure how that ended up there.
Well, I remember seeing it on the site visit.
Yeah.
The neighbor said it'd been there for months, so
Okay. I
it
will.
would be nice to get that cleaned up.
Absolutely.
The CAC did look at this without doing any full recommendations to you guys on last Wednesday. And they did vote to let you know that, they felt that the environmental impacts for getting, an area variance on the lot line adjustment were pretty high and they were concerned about precedent. So it's not a recommendation that goes to you, it's a recommendation that goes to the zoning board. But I think at their next meeting, they're probably going to recommend pretty strongly to the zoning board that they felt that that there were a lot of negative impacts to an area variance that would push that lot line closer to the single family home. They did see this plan. They didn't comment on it too much because they needed to work specifically on the lot line adjustment request that was going to the zoning board potentially in the July meeting. But they were not, they really felt there was a lot of impacts to an area variance. So, and then the other thing was they didn't really review the whole site for a special use permit site plan because they weren't sure where the boundary was going to be. But they did look at their old recommendation to you guys in the town board. and they just went through the different findings that they had made, and they still felt like there was a number of concerns they had. The findings in their preliminary review were still pretty powerful, even with just the one house coming down, just so you know where their heads are at on that.
And I'm not surprised.
Mhm.
So this is the current plan that'll be going to the ZBA, correct?
No, this plan wouldn't get denied. I mean, Devin has to show that there's 80 feet of frontage at the setback
Okay.
line. Like he has to actually mark that, but they haven't withdrawn their zoning board of appeals request that we made action on.
Okay,
This is something new. And I guess maybe based on the feedback, if it was something the board was willing to entertain, he would have to finalize and formalize the drawing and then withdraw his zoning board of appeals request.
So this is more a backup plan?
No, I think this would be the plan. You know, we're continually trying to take input from the board and improve the plan. So there's a lot of opposition to the variance. You know, we went back and did a pretty substantial change to it. You know, we mostly tried to keep the essence of it up until this point. So if the board's favorable to this, we're favorable as well. We'd prefer to move this forward.
So this is a culmination of the feedback you got from the planning board, from the architectural review board, because they saw the other plan, not this plan, right?
That's correct.
Correct. They have not seen.
So this is a result of that and even feedback from the CAC, right?
Right. Yeah, Devin did. I gave Devin the heads up on the CAC.
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, I agree with Leslie. I do think that this applicant continues to take feedback from each of our meetings, combine that with their corporate objectives and the code. And, you know, this is another example of that I hope is looked at favorably by the board. I look at this and I see the benefit to single family homes marketability, you know, and consistency on South Vegan, and direct feedback of moving that that main entrance further away from the one resident that has had specific experiences that were not favorable to her. So that combines so many of those things. We have the sidewalk that's being added. Out of curiosity, what does this total parking count result in
You know,
comparison
I
to?
thought about it when I walked in and I had it in my head. So, you know, our original plan, when we first came a couple years ago, I think was on the order of 90 something.
Right.
And we were whittled all the way down to like 50 something. I think this is more on the realm of like 60 something.
Okay.
Maybe high 60s. So it's beneficial to us as well, obviously.
There's two areas of stacked parking here, right? To the south and to the east?
Yeah, so really the increase in parking from prior plans is really correct right there, that we've stacked on the dealership lot. Even really those that we've stacked in the new parking were more of a reconfiguration as we've, you know, compressed all these. But really the big windfall is, I think there was 12 or 14 spaces on South Fagan on the dealership parking lot right there.
Do you have any insight at this stage whether that double stacked or stacked parking closest to Fagan will be elevated with some sort of retaining wall, or will it be grade?
So I did do a couple sections through there. We do not need a retaining wall. We can do it with a similar construction they have now. It would be a slope bank. I call for some landscaping around the light poles because we'd have to relocate those, and we can actually slope it just slightly into the parking. So it would continue the slope that the parking spaces have now. So we'd still be able to utilize the existing drainage.
Right.
I had a question in regards to the stacked parking. Is this something that you have used before, or would this be new? Because the reason I just want to give context to why I'm asking is because the solution is only good if it's actually functional and it ends up being
Sure.
used.
So I wouldn't typically design a striped parking that's stacked. What happens on car dealerships is they stack cars regardless.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they're gonna put cars wherever they can. So, and again, it goes to that mentality. If you have 200 cars on site, you're gonna have 10 of one in white and 10 of one in red. You know, they order multiples of exact cars. Those can be stacked and pushed in the back. You can shuffle cars and pull them as you need to. We still have driving lanes and all those things, so most of the cars will be accessible. It's just these two locations that we have some stacked cars. And depending on how they do it, they may leave, Plan North there, the new double stacked, that's where they're gonna unload cars. Maybe they'll put the unloaded cars in those spaces temporarily, leave them open. I'm not really sure, but I could see it being used for something like that.
Thank you.
So the parking, there's quite a bit of parking spaces. I mean, you have employee parking, you're gonna have customer parking, you're going to have visitors, obviously just coming in.
Correct.
And then obviously the number count of whatever you want to keep inventory, which will fluctuate a little bit. Plus, this doesn't show the refurbishing lot, which too has ability for parking, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I think generally, I agree with Mr. Laflamme. This plan has been very responsive to a lot of the concerns that all the boards have had. Again, if you find out that your drainage system on the back end where the two detention ponds need to expand, even if a couple of those parking spaces
Right.
become part of that, that's only better for the adjacent property. But, showing the code compliant frontage and then the trapezoidal lot and the retaining of, some of the existing vegetation that's along South Fagan. I went by this past weekend to take a look, not when it was raining, but a very brief window when we get over there. But, again, I went over with the sole purpose to look at the house that was being proposed. And again, I understand that it's a residential lot that's going to be absorbed in this plan. But when you look again at what's along State Street on both sides, you see how dominant that this is a commercial strip. And again, that plan that we did with the overall overlay that shows, where the blue kind of goes into the adjacent neighborhoods, I think it was a good exercise and just demonstrates that this isn't a huge insertion into the residential area. So again, if you take that lower red line, almost like pointing down to the bottom of the page, that's going to go up right about where that cursor is. So,
Right.
so it's, almost 40% of what that footprint was.
Yeah, and I think the way it's configured with some of the existing vegetation, the privacy fence, it's really the house that's going to remain at 33 is really going to feel separated and private. Or however that ultimately ends.
Okay. So I guess to recap at this point, this is going to be the preferred plan moving forward?
Yes.
Okay. As Ms. Roberts had said, I think there's some additional information that would need to be cleaned up. That'll go on the application to the ZBA, correct?
He would completely withdraw from the ZBA. It's not needed.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So the lot line adjustment is
Is-
just on us.
Yeah,
We
mhm,
will-
it
okay.
would just be a planning board action.
Okay.
He's now compliant with all of the
So-
zoning requirements.
Okay.
Much
Yeah,
improved. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Leslie. Yeah, essentially, we wanted to get some feedback before we formally pulled from the zoning, but I think it seems favorable, so we'll
Mhm.
work with Laura and pull that application and then get on
Just-
the next meeting.
Just as I think you're going to cover it, but make sure that when you have the final design, the lighting is very clearly set
Yes.
and that the bleed over and the floodlights, all the protections against the residents. See in the light.
So that kind of raises a question, right? We still have multiple steps that we're working through. One is the lot line adjustment, which I think should be relatively easy now. Then we have the special use permit, which is a recommendation of the town board. And then after that, we'll ultimately come back for site plan review. When do you want to start seeing some of those more elevated design items? Is it limited to just the lighting? We have our landscaping and some of those things on there.
Right now, the first two things have to happen first
Right.
in order to get that. So I think this plan is developed enough, at least my opinion, that can
Okay.
be part of that recommendation for the special use permit.
Okay.
I think everyone agreeing with that? I don't think we need to see further engineering. Those are all things that if
Yep.
granted site plan approval, we'll work through on those things.
Okay.
And again,
Okay.
if that gets tweaked or something, that's something in our purveyance that we can do. It's if there's another shift of any type of design thing, that's just going to restart the clock for you.
Okay. So minor tweaks as we get into the engineering and feedback from site plan review, that's
Mhm.
fine, but obviously any major changes to the plan would then be referred back for the special use permit.
The example would be if you realize that your detention basins are not large enough and you
Right.
lose parking spaces. I don't think that would be a large issue. But if you
Right.
came back
Okay.
and changed a curb cut or something like that, that would
Yeah, I
again
don't
just
believe-
start the conversation over.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So
So special use permit is for the use.
Correct.
So if
Right,
you
yeah.
define the lot and then you say, I'm getting the special use permit for the parking lot, then the town board's done.
Okay.
Then reconfiguring the parking lot and making it work for site plan, those are all things that you would
Mhm.
do here with the planning
Right.
board. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not anticipating any major reconfig. We've, I think at this point exhausted our ideas. The only thing I could see is a reduction if we needed to for stormwater.
And the Norway spruce.
Vinny's gonna speak to that. It's on the plan, but
Mhm.
yeah. Okay, so Chris, do you want to actually see like photometric mapping of the lighting, or do you want to keep it at this point? That
No, like.
we'll
Chairman
hammer
said,
it out.
I just
Mhm.
want to be sure you, any narrative.
Okay,
like, is capturing that element.
You're right.
Because of the use and the residential.
Okay.
That would be the only thing, but then when we get to that point.
yeah, we can do that. I'm showing very, very minimal lighting, and we only have 3 in all the new parking, 2 in the parking, 1 at the entrance, just to make it safe to come in and out. So, but
Yeah.
we can work through that, obviously. Again.
Yeah, I would say you don't need to have those things, but my anticipation would be that the town board would have similar input to what the planning board had. So if you
Sure.
do have at least some plans, we wouldn't require them of you, but it helps the town board make a decision on the impacts to the community if you at least flush some of
I
it
can
out.
produce it. That's
Yeah.
why I'm asking. I mean, it's something we can put together easily enough. So if it's something that's interest to the board, we can do that.
Yeah, I think the goal is to minimize the negative impacts on the neighborhood.
Sure. Yeah.
Obviously, making the business look better is a positive impact, and we wouldn't want to cut that back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's all still there, the dealership and, all those things. And again, landscaping, I think at this point we have new landscaping on every side just about. So. So what would be the next meeting then? Would it be,
16.
would it be for the lot line adjustment and a recommendation for special use? Okay.
Our meeting,
So would you have to approve the lot line
Says
adjustment
14.
essentially before?
July 16th is the zoning board meeting. I've been doing zoning. Yeah, 14 would be the next planning board meeting, and it would be recommendation for the town board. Sorry, recommendation to the town board on a special use permit. And I mean, it's up to you guys. If you can get the drawing in for the lot line adjustment, we can review it and have it ready for resolution at that meeting.
Okay. That's what I was curious if that had to be done before we went to special use. Or do they kind of assume that it's been reviewed and recommendation is you would approve it?
They can go together, but if you
Okay.
want to do the lot line adjustment ahead of time, I don't think that hurts anything.
Okay.
I think it would be beneficial to have approval from this board with the lot line adjustment as part of the special use recommendation.
Yeah,
That's my
So
opinion
we'd-
on that.
resolution for lot line adjustment,
Mhm.
and then second point, recommendation to the town board on special use permit. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's clear. So,
Yeah, and because the meeting is so far apart, we can prep the town board for this coming and have the because they have 3-step process. They have to do a resolution to call, then for the public hearing, then they have to hold the public hearing, and then, so we can have tentative a resolution to call for a public hearing in July from them too.
so at this point, Lori, the most critical thing is a lot line adjustment to get to you.
Yeah, what we need to see is the actual measurements on that lot line adjustment plan.
Yep.
And if you can resubmit a special use permit plan that actually puts the number of parking spaces like in a little circle. Yeah, so we don't have to
I can
keep
definitely do
in
that.
counting them. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
it's always fun counting them.
It's a different number every time you count
Yeah,
them.
That's, yes, exactly. Okay. All right. And then I'll probably reach out with an email, but you can let me know dates of when you need all this stuff to
Okay,
stay on
yep,
track. So,
that's
okay.
good. Yeah.
All right.
Always include Clark.
Yes, I will. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. Thank you. You. Have a
All
good
right, we
evening.
appreciate all the effort that you've put into this and working with us on this
Sure.
application.
Yeah, I think we're getting there. So, thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
Good night.
Okay.
Per you guys' request, we didn't really talk about it too much, but the special use permit criteria is in there. So maybe, or did I put it in there? Oh yeah, I did. So maybe look at that because we would use it as a basis for a recommendation in the July meeting. So you have like a month to be thinking about what findings you would want to put there.
Right.
Really, Chris, probably you should draft the findings based on this input, and you can work with Clark and I for that.
Okay.
Thank you, Laura.
Mhm.
Okay, next up is 1748 Union Street, Broadview Credit Union, site plan application for new use requiring a use variance for external improvements. This is a new application. And Sternberg.
Daniel Hirschberg, the firm of Hirschberg and Hirschberg. I'm here today representing Broadview Federal Credit Union. They operate the bank that's in the city of Schenectady. Unfortunately, the municipal boundary goes right through our site, or we would have been able to make this a composite lot, and we wouldn't have the use variance from anybody because the parking lot would be supporting the bank. But we have to do what we have. So we have the municipal boundary going through the site, and that goes right through here. And it leaves us with this lot here, which used to have a building on, now has a gravel area in the middle. And the rest of it is pretty much filled with asphalt. The proposed site plan, which is the next sheet, shows what we intend to do with it. We would reduce the amount of asphalt on a site, add green space in front with a little walk connecting in here and a couple of benches and some nice landscaping out front. We think it'd be a big improvement for the look of the lot, and it'll look very nice. And this'll, we also are reworking the exit lane here, and we'll also have to appear in front of the city of Schenectady. The city of Schenectady had a recommendation that we further reduce the curb cut, so we are doing that on our last plan. We're taking this driveway and we're combining it in with the drive-through lane and we cut down the width of that driveway. It doesn't affect the work in your municipality, but does affect the work in the city of Schenectady. So the final plan, when we get through the city of Schenectady, will be somewhat different than what you're seeing here today, but that'll be the only change, the width of that curb cut. We think this is a good project. Broadview was doing quite well. They think to stay competitive, they have to make regular improvements. All these banks, every 10 or 15 years, have to reinvent themselves, sort of. And they want to increase their drive-through capability, and in the same tone of supply parking over here will be convenient for their use. We do have I think the next plan might have a lighting, photometric plan on it, which, oops, no, we got to go back. That's the, no. Oh yeah, here it is. This photometric plan, we propose to put in one new light standard here that we directed out, and you see the type of fixture is a downlighting type of fixture. And it will, the light just about fills the footprint of our new parking area, and then it doesn't go any further. So there'll be no overflow into adjoining properties. We'll compare it with your lighting recommendations at our next meeting here. We think it meets it, but we'll review it carefully, be sure we meet that. Other than that, I don't know what else to tell you, other than the fact we do need a use variance, and the use variance is a little bit difficult to get normally. But I think in this case, whether or not that was created by the applicant is a good question here. We think it was more created by the fact that the municipal boundary cuts off the applicant from making complying lots for this. So we're trying to make that case next with our use variance application. And hopefully it'll succeed. If it doesn't, I guess we're not gonna be able to do the project because we need this use variance. The only, they could build a building on here, a small building with an ATM in it. I recommended that to them and they said, no, that's not what they want to do. It would not operate properly and they think it would probably look strange to have a small outbuilding out here on this lot. So I'm prepared to answer any questions you folks may have at this point so that we can take it further.
Okay, thank you. So a little bit of history of the site. There used to be a brick building there.
Yep,
And it was torn down. Does Broadview currently own this lot?
currently do, yes.
Okay. All right.
But Broadview didn't own it when the house
What's
was
it?
leveled. Did Broadview own it when the house was leveled?
The name is on the, I don't know. I don't know what, I don't happen to know the name of the original owner.
It was,
Yeah, I don't think it did. Like Andrew asked me that question, and I can get more of that data, but we actually saw an application by the owner that I think that tore it down, possibly
can't remember.
without a building permit, would be that guy who was looking at taking the retaining wall out and making it, yeah.
right. We saw a previous application.
Yeah, we did.
A couple years ago.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, the internet claims it's still there.
The building?
Yep, it shows it.
Yeah, it takes a while for it to catch up.
I do have a question about I happen to be a member. I do park in the customer space. Is that parking lot that's being proposed, is that going to be employee parking?
No, its employees are overfull for patrons.
So
Right now, if the parking lot was filled,
Yeah.
people could park on the street, but ideally, if the parking lot's filled, they'll go right over here and park here and walk back to the branch.
So just to confirm, so the parking lot that is currently the customer parking lot, that's sandwiched between the access road for the drive-through and
Yeah.
the building, is still going to be an island of it on its
Yes.
own.
Island's gonna separate it.
And it was, just curious, was there any consideration about if you go in there and it's full, you can continue to go straight to go to the additional parking, or no, you have to go back out onto Palmer and then come back around the road that says drive-through, knowing that there's
So
additional parking spots
If you
there?
came this direction to go through the drive-through, then you want to go back to the branch?
So if you go into the island parking that's existing today
Yeah,
and you see that there's no parking for you,
okay, then you
you
do
have
have
to
to,
somehow turn around where there's no room to turn around, back onto Palmer and then go south and realize it's okay to take the access road to the drive-through to get to the other parking. And it just, the flow to me might be a little bit confusing, and I just thought I'd bring that up.
we could think of that at the cost of a couple parking spots. We could connect it in between the two. There's not much grade difference in there, so we could connect it between that driveway and the parking. That's something we'll take under consideration with the city of Schenectady, but it's a good thought.
And then this will all be graded to be the same grade, a
Yeah,
small
it's
slope
pretty
up?
much it has one grade in this direction, but it's very flat at that direction.
so
I've got a procedural question. Assuming they get the use variance, it comes back to us for site plan. Does the city have input on that part of it or
On the use variance or on the site plan?
site plan?
Yeah, we will coordinate both things with the city. Yeah.
Because it's a little unusual.
It's a little unusual.
Yeah.
I get the unusual projects.
We
So-
do too.
So this entrance to the bank off of Palmer's always been problematic because it's a very, very tight parking lot. It's close to the traffic light. It's nearly impossible to take a left out of there, although people try to do it. It's tough. I would say that, if we get to a point where, this is something that we're going to entertain to get the parking lot as a primary use on the Niskayuna parcel, somehow looking at that reconfiguration to a single curb cut that's a little further
Yeah.
would be to the south
Yeah.
would definitely be advantageous. You know,
Uh-huh.
two of them right next to each other is tough, even though one should just be an ingress and not be an egress. But you've got people now that can park in a parking lot. If they're not going to go out on Union, they could try to go out that way. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's a tough, tight.
Yeah, well, think about this entire area and see how to get access to this existing parking and connect it so they don't have to go out this way. They can go out to Union Street.
Right.
That'd be the goal. It's a site we should work on.
And do we look at green space requirements just on the part that's in Iskuna?
Be hard because there aren't really green space requirements because it's not a permitted use. So we
Well,
could
there is
compare
that
it.
too,
Yeah,
yes.
so we could compare it to like maybe something relatively similar and take a look at that.
But meanwhile, we can note that we would be looking for some green space.
Right, because you know, use variance kind of sets its own thing, but I do know that there's a ton of asphalt between the ends of these parking spots and
Yeah,
anywhere. Like if I were driving in here, I'm not sure that I would even realize that this parking is overflow bank parking. It looks like it's like random Upper Union Street parking, which may in and of itself not necessarily be bad, but there's so much asphalt between here and here. I mean, this is like just an open area of pavement. I mean, I would scooch those parking spaces way closer and get green space, like you just said. Yeah.
yeah, it's not particularly attractive the way,
It's not
Yes.
making use of the paved
Yeah.
surface.
We can take a look at that one. Again, this is our first appearance here. We have an
Mhm.
appearance in the city of Schenectady next week. What they have to say, and we can come together and see whether or not we can't make a plan that works better for everybody.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we? Go ahead.
Do we want to give them any feedback for the use variance part of it? Like, do you guys just want to discuss whether or not you would entertain a parking lot in that area? Or does it seem like a concept that you could recommend to the zoning board? So it's zoned neighborhood commercial, and you know, a variety of things are allowed there. What was there before, I think, was a multi-use building.
Mhm.
So commercial on the bottom and apartment unit on the top. It could have restaurant, it could have a variety of different things on it.
it was actually listed as a house.
Yeah, I think at some point, I think maybe the commercial on the first floor disappeared and it just became kind of residential. Yeah.
So I guess I need guidance on this. We have an application for only one use. Like, we're not going to predict or determine or dictate what it needs to be used for. We're going to respond to what the applicant's requested, correct?
Yes,
Mhm.
but here's the caveat.
This
Your
whole,
role would be to make a recommendation to the ZBA on the use variance. And if your position is parking only in Niskayuna is really a bad use of a lot in Niskayuna, then you should just tell the applicant sooner rather than later before they get more invested in the plan. I mean, it may be the case that this actually makes sense. Like, we may think, the applicant correctly pointed out, it was just a bad draw that this lot is in two municipalities, right? So, it'll be interesting to see whether the argument that it's not self-created works. It's just a bad draw. Like, that's actually, I think, a clever argument. But,
Can I just clarify that though? It is two separate lots. That's why there was a building on it before. When the building got demolished and they wanted to use it as a parking lot, then the bank wanted to combine the old lot that stood on its own and had a building and contributed to the Upper Union Street they wanted to combine that lot with the bank lot to have one lot so that they could have a parking lot. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the county does not allow you to combine lots on either side of a municipality. So they can't. But there was 2 parcels, 2 separate businesses. They tried to make it one and they can't. So now they're asking for a use variance.
But the county does allow existing lots that have parcels in both.
Yeah, I mean, there are parcels where the line goes right across the building. Yeah, and I mean, they are
Yes.
actually 2 separate parcels, but they're pre-existing non-conforming.
We
This,
have a house of worship that has the line going right through. the
yeah.
front.
I mean, this was a small lot and part of it was in the, if your existing plan shows it, like part of it was in the city of Schenectady.
But it's.
Um,
Oh, they can't.
I guess you can actually see it, right? So this like wide line that's kind of light gray is the boundary. This parcel that used to have a building on it was here. So a part of this parcel was in the town and a part of it was in the city of Schenectady. And then a part of the old bank parcel comes into the back of Niskayuna. But there were 2 separate parcels and 2 separate building businesses on it.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I would say that it was a bad draw. I think they're trying to expand their parking lot into the town of Niskayuna.
So I'll tell you where my position is. I don't think parking as a primary use of a lot is a good thing. However, if there was a plan that maybe added some sort of, public space along the sidewalk area on Union Street, enhanced it, and somehow solved the curb cut issues collectively, then I would be open to reviewing that as a special use permit. But as a primary thing, and it's what Ms. Robertson said, there was a structure there. There was a solid brick house that was there. It was raised on purpose. It's currently being used as a parking lot. There are
Illegal.
a
They're not
handful
allowed
of
to be
cars
there.
that are there. I live in, yeah, they're in there. So I mean, it's an enforcement issue with the town, but that's definitely where I'm at least in the initial step.
So do you think by making a public use out of the front portion of that, could we make that little landscape area and sitting area for a public use as a portion of our site? Would that help their position at all regarding the zone?
Let's define that. Are you like a sitting area, a park, a small park?
Yeah, it's like
something that?
it's like a park that would be maintained by the owner.
So there is adjacent to this is a school, right? A dance school?
On the backside, in the backside.
Next to it is a salon.
And next to it is a salon that a lot of people I know go to
And a short-term rental.
with a short-term rental.
Mhm.
That's
Only
right.
one
And
we
it's
have in a CN zone.
So I agree with the chairman on the use and making it a lot for dedicated for parking doesn't fit. But if you can keep in mind the community there, I know there's a lot of parents that are sitting for hours waiting for their kids that are taking dance classes. I don't know if they'd have feedback to give as to what value a park might have in proximity to the dance studio. Again, I'm a member, and that if this solves that island parking scenario where someone goes in and realizes they can't park, now they got to back out to a busy street that you can't because, as the chairman pointed out, there's a line of it, the red light, it doesn't work. So there is a real specific problem that I would like to see addressed, I guess, in any sort of recommendation that I can experience a different experience that's safer,
Yeah.
And this float is, if that remains an island parking space, that's not solving the problem, in my opinion.
Well, we can certainly connect that in so that nobody's stuck with the problems of backing out. They can go straight across into the the furthest ATM lane and go out that way.
So a couple, I think, clarification things maybe for the planning department. If the kiosk ended up on the Niskayuna parcel, that still would not constitute, it would still be predominantly parking, correct?
I would have to look into that. I mean,
Okay.
maybe a kiosk would count as a bank. Not sure.
So then the second question would be, is that if there was the discussion of a pocket park and that that dedicated area had some sort of open covered structure, would an accessory, I would think that would be considered an accessory structure. Would that count as something that would not make that primarily a parking lot?
I don't think that in a CN zone, a permitted principal use is a park either, though, oddly enough. I think the zoning just doesn't contemplate that because typically parks are publicly owned.
Mhm.
What if it was a historic monument reflecting the history of Niskuna?
Yeah, I mean, what Rob was saying, and I didn't mean to cut him off because he probably still had more things to say. I just wanted to make sure that we knew that that it was two separate things. I mean, theoretically, the use variance is looking at what alternatives are on the parcel. And the first alternative that you would look at is what would be allowed, right? So, and then decide if it's possible to make those things that are allowable, or if this is really the only use that that property can have,
How about if
based
it's
on our
just a better
zoning.
use?
Well, I mean, that can be a recommendation you make the zoning board. And, you know, Mr. Hirschberg understands this. When he goes to the zoning board, he has to present on those 4 criteria for a use variance, and they're hard. You guys can talk about the character of the neighborhood and how this site can help with some constraints on the city of Schenectady side. But it does, I think, at some point, whether it comes from planning board or zoning board, you do have to consider what are the allowable uses. Could they actually be executed, you know, in a reasonable fashion, or does it rise to the level of needing a use variance?
And I can think of something going in and the credit union customer is still using the available parking there.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
quite possible. It's very unusual. It is a small lot.
Made a welcome to Niskuna Park there. Would that
I
help?
there's a couple of members on this board that have done a lot to recognize Paul Schaefer. And there's been a lot of momentum there. And I was just thinking, from Schenectady, you're kind of entering the Paul Schaefer corridor in some, just directionally, you know, so aligned with, and again, I don't know if it's permitted use. I don't know. We don't have a historic district. We're beginning to define those things, but in the, you know, maybe perhaps the combination of those things kind of emerging, maybe that location would be, as you're coming from Schenectady, entering Niskuna, a place to recognize its history with a park that Broadview is participating with on land that's Niskuna. So just putting our thoughts together on what Laura's challenging us to think about is the use, you know, and is parking lot a good enough use for a lot? But if it did help us celebrate some of the things that are gaining momentum in our town, that's a good location to have something like that.
My opinion on that is that we have consistently held as a board, a zoning board and a planning board, that a parking lot as a permitted principal use in any zoning district is not something that we like. So I do think that it would be useful to look at it as a park/parking lot, because it would help to distinguish it if that's something that we're going along, because precedent wise, I think that we always have to be careful with parking lot as a permitted principal use.
And I do agree with that, but I'm seeing maybe some special circumstances.
Like if there's a sort of a secondary thing that goes along with it. Yeah.
Well, if it's of greater benefit to the town, then maybe some accommodations appropriate. And I'm still evaluating that.
How many parking spots would be sacrificed in order for that? I mean, how large would the park be proposed? Not to prejudge where it would go or how big, but then when does it possibly defeat the purpose of being a parking lot for the applicant? Just thoughts.
I don't know. I'm hard pressed to think about whether or not Laura could verify how large of a structure, whatever you would call it, would qualify for something else other than a parking lot.
Yeah.
You don't want to build another bank building there, obviously,
Right.
but there could be another use in there, some decorative type of structure that could fall under some terminology that's
You like
permitted.
gazebo or something that people
We
can,
could see whether or
Yeah.
not we could do that to get away from having to do the use variance. That'd be ideal. I'm not so sure we could find something like that, or
well,
whether or not making it a park. Isn't there a place where public parks are committed or not?
I think in land conservation, you can create conservation areas, but I don't think our code contemplates like private parks
Okay.
a lot. I mean, I can double.
Well, I would
Yeah.
call this a public park being maintained by a private entity is what we,
Right. Which,
so
you
that
know,
we
is
get
always
the
ideal
benefit
for
of
our-
having an area open to the public,
Yeah, it's
not burdening your people maintaining it.
yeah, it's no different than some of the areas downtown where the restaurant storefronts take care of what's outside. They sweep. I mean, they don't do the capital improvements, but they
Yeah.
maintain. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We obviously maybe one more pass at this might be something good. We're all well aware this is a problematic corner just
Yeah.
because of how tight it is. That parking lot that's existing is really tight. Adding a drive-through lane could be confusing to some that don't use it a lot and they pull into the wrong place. You know,
Well.
I could get behind something that would be an improvement that solves this because of the location of where it is. You know, I would love to see a building on Union Street to keep the streetscape, but again, you know, having a structure that used to be there, I think just demonstrates that was a lot that was sustainable for a long time.
We're looking sort of at public safety concerns and making this site more attractive.
Yeah.
More Niskuna-like.
Yeah. Well, it's not attractive now, so that's
And
an
it was-
understatement.
I just can't help it. I guess it doesn't matter. The building that was there, the structure that was there, suffered. It wasn't a positive experience with the area, but it did sustain itself at one point.
Mhm. Okay.
I'm envisioning a lean-to, with a brass, sculpture of Mr. Darpino in the chair.
Okay, we're going down the rabbit hole a little too far. So, I think you got some initial
I
feedback
know.
from the board. Why don't you go back? In the interim, I think the planning department will confirm confirm what can go on in the CN zone, so we can at least give that information back to you, so you could talk about that with the client and see what the next step would be. And then if anyone's interested, we will need a project lead on this. So it's like a very interesting one.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you for your time. Okay, last discussion item is 4240 Consall Road, Mizan Kitchen, a site plan applicant for a tenant change, including a use variance. Hi.
My name is Leila Khafaga. I'm proposing at 4240 a Mizan Bakery and Cafe. It would be one of the first Middle Eastern bakeries in the Capital District. Probably, I think, don't quote me on this, the first open bakery in Niskuna. So right now I have a ghost kitchen. I've been operating for 4 years. We built a strong following of strong customer base in Niskuna, Schenectady, Colony, Saratoga. So I already have that following. And now I'm looking to go into my next phase, which is a storefront, which is a very scary idea, but we're going to do it. So when I saw Stewart's close, I'm like, oh my God, is this going to go for sale? So, and it's everyone's, they're like, that's my Stewart's, that's my Stewart's. I know it's everyone loves that Stewart's. I think it's a perfect location for a bakery. The problem right now, so we are in contract. We're in attorney approval stage, and they have a deed restriction. So if anyone even wants to come and stay as a retail, they can't be a convenience, they can't be a deli, they can't sell certain coffees, they can't sell, there's a few restrictions on there that they put, so it will make it hard for anyone to come in as a retail. So I will need a zone change, sorry if I'm not using the right lingo, to a restaurant or potentially a commercial neighborhood type of zoning. So,
Use variance.
sorry, yes, use variance.
All right, thank you. Well, it's, yeah, surprising if Stewart's is closed. So,
I know, and they told me the reason why they're closing is because their sales isn't as great. as obviously the gas stations and everything else. So
Did Stewart's lease that property or own it?
no, they
themselves?
owned it.
Yeah, they bought it from the previous business that was there, which I believe was Norman Scale.
Norman Skill, I used to ride my bike there when I was a kid.
Okay.
I remember
Heartbroken
seeing
when
it.
they
I
sh- when
couldn't
they
come up with
closed
stuff. I looked on the internet.
They've been there for the longest time
Yeah.
though. So
It's definitely pre-existing non-conforming to 1971. It's definitely been there since before 1971.
So in your review of the site that you've taken a look at, we saw the
Mhm.
the plan that you had here. So it doesn't look like there's a lot of employees that'll be there.
yeah, we're thinking at most, obviously depending on traffic and how busy we get, 4 or 5. So on the west side, 4 or 5 at any given time. And this is a very quick drawing. And we actually are probably going to reconfigure it a bit because I don't want to move the plumbing and extra costs, obviously. But at any given time, we're hoping maybe 5 employees. And I would like, after this process keeps going, on the west side to add a few more parking spots just for employees, like along the west side. So
That's
so-
where I was headed.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um,
That's ideal if obviously it gets approved. So
But right now, the would be to keep everything as is, correct?
exterior, yeah.
Exterior, parking, everything, lighting. What about lighting and signage? Some basic stuff. would
Signage,
be-
yeah.
Okay.
Front and side, that
Okay.
Zen Bakery Cafe, and then also I would like to paint the brick, make it a little brighter and like freshen up the place, and probably over time work on some landscaping in that little garden bed and in the back. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So there's definite protocols for the size of the signage. If anything would be, you have 2 facades, so you'd be permitted 2 signs. And then if there's anything additional to that, if you want a monument sign or something like that, that would obviously go through the planning department review. If it was non-compliant for whatever reason, we had to see it, it would come back to us.
Perfect.
So you could do signage completely separately if you choose to. A lot of applicants do that. They come in with the signage afterwards if it just makes more sense for them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so open up to discussion.
I would say, depending upon what you're painting the brick, please be prudent with your colors. It's a
Oh, yeah.
very residential area
Yes.
and we wouldn't want anything pink with purple polka dots.
Yeah, no, our branding is actually very subtle, black and gold, and I'm thinking either white or I'm not really the designer. I have someone who plans to do that. But yes, it would be tasteful and I would probably run it by you guys also. So
Would there be any outdoor seating?
So we looked at that potentially in the back, if you could go to the side picture, in the grass area in the summer. Potentially, I know Stewart's had their benches there. That could be maybe a next year thing or as we go. So I would like to, if construction allows, put some windows there and eventually have like a small window walk-up pickup to make it easier for people in like nicer weather times. So, and I know recently, I think someone actually crashed into one of the windows and they put brick up, which I wish they didn't, but I would hopefully like to add a little more windows in there to brighten up the place. So, because inside is a complete gut job. So,
Laura, I'm anticipating a cafe is going to attract some people. So I'm not sure what the ratio of floor space in terms of, and can they expand some of their parking? Will that go over code? That little kind of green area in the corner there that's kind of independent. Do they
Yeah.
have room for more parking there? Because I would anticipate this is going to see some business.
that's the goal. Yes.
We do need, she's still got to fill out a couple of things and we do need an overall site plan so that we could really get those measurements. But, I guess it depends on it, like if you have to keep the drive around the building or not, to the back. I don't know if that was like for deliveries or whatever that is.
There's really no drive space behind because they added an additional like unit that's connected.
That's all great.
It doesn't look like there's too much drive space behind.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
so, So Clark put the parking calculations in here. If it's a restaurant, sit down and takeout, it's pretty similar to retail. So we can do what the parking spaces would be required based on the square footage. If it's fully sit down, then it's got a pretty hefty parking requirement there. Yeah.
And is that just driven by the fact that she has any sit down or a number of tables inside?
Yeah, so I feel like it's kind of like the difference between like a Wingstop where you mostly just go in, maybe you use a table, or Papa John's. You use the table to sit down while you're waiting for the last 2 minutes for your pizza to be ready, but you don't eat there a whole lot. Versus, like a Pizzeria Uno or somewhere where like you go and you sit for a couple hours. So I think the parking requirement gets more stringent when people aren't just going in and out. Because when they're going in and out, then the parking spaces are rotating more freely, so you don't need as many. If you get there and there's a lot of seating on the inside, then you need a lot of parking spaces on the outside. Her proposal doesn't have a lot of seating on the outside, and it is pickup. So I think we'd probably look more to the 200 square feet, because it doesn't look like it's really contemplating a lot of people staying there for a given point in time, like more like a Starbucks. But it's something that we would work through with site plan.
And that would include if they decided to have outdoor seating, would that include that as well?
They would have to come back for approval for outdoor seating.
Okay.
The thing with pre-existing non-conforming sites is they may not have enough parking to begin with, like because they were built prior to our zoning code. So we can do the calculations for you. The demand may not change a whole lot by our code, but they may still be short of parking. That's why when you're looking at a use variance, it's anything, you can't take an existing non-conforming use and change it to anything but a conforming use. So like theoretically, if it wasn't going to be retail, it could go to like a church, or like, I mean, it'd be really hard to put a single family home there. It'd be a super tough lot for a single family home.
Yeah, that was my question, Lauren. Is there something that someone could come to us with that would not require action?
Well, no, because any tenant change is always going to require
Right.
action. The one thing that wouldn't require a use variance is if it went from retail to retail. But, the problem that we see sometimes with the Stewarts is I think because they all put deed restrictions on there. Like we have seen, I know in Charlton, one of them changed to a well now, but some of them, because there's so much restriction on the retail, in my opinion, it's undesirable to have smoke shops and things, but they do change to things that don't interfere with like a convenience store is a type of retail that could go in there. If you go and you see what goes into the old Stewart's when they build themselves across the corner, it gives you a sense of what you can see there going in. And obviously this couldn't change to a well now without a use variance either. So the only thing that wouldn't require a use variance is retail.
Okay. And it would be retail without any of the restrictions of that Stewart's.
Well, Stewart's is the owner, so they have the right to put the deed restriction on it. So they can kind of control the retail that goes in there. But we can't. So retail, retail is retail. We do have limits on smoke shops, like for instance, they have to be far away from a school, but we can't, like, I always use the tilted kilt, like people were so upset about the tilted kilt going in, but it's a restaurant. So a restaurant is a restaurant, retail is a retailer, so you could have retail there, or if it can't go to a conforming use, which we're talking about in that area, then anything else needs a use variance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Laura, this is retail, right?
No, we classified it, especially because she has the tables, as a restaurant with takeout. Yeah, that's why it needs the use variance.
Okay, I was just confirming that. 'Cause
It
I
would
could
be
see a
retail,
clock.
like if she had like aisles and things, but it really is more of we don't have any bakeries actually, but we calculate it more like a Starbucks or something, where you've got a couple tables at the front. Most of the store is being used to make delicious things, and then you have a counter, so you can go in and just grab something from the counter and leave, or you can chat with a friend or
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
And Layla, I'm guessing, I think you indicated this in your plan. This gives you a commercial kitchen for the other aspects of your business, right? A big
Yes,
part
so
of this
we
is
plan-
giving you
Yeah, we have wholesale catering.
existing already.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
Wholesale catering. We do farmers markets. We ship nationwide. We have 2 trademark products. So it gets a bigger space. Customers can easily find me now, and we can now offer cafe items, so drinks and all. So.
So I believe we will need a site plan, correct? As part of
Yeah,
the
we do.
application? All right.
Yeah.
And we know that definitely the R1 zone, if the Stewarts didn't, if the building wasn't on there, do we know if a single family home could be put on there and be compliant on that parcel?
Oh, like bulk requirement?
Yeah,
I can look at that. My guess
Okay.
is it could, but
just so we have a baseline, so
Just
we
like-
know what we're,
yeah, cost wise, I think there was underground gas tanks there too. So
Yes.
it's one of those ones that would be hard to convert to a single family.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can look.
So
and
I'm
see.
waiting on reports from Stewarts. They're saying they did remove the tanks. So we're waiting for that to see. And then I'm also going to get it environmentally tested to see
Okay.
if like the ground's contaminated or not. So it's also an issue for converting it to single family. They said it was removed potentially 20 or so years ago. Not sure. So.
Aside from the parking calculations and, a site plan and, a look at it from the CAC, I don't think this one has as many complications as the previous one. So, based on the timeline of the denial, if she was to go to the July meeting, you guys would need to call for a recommendation at your next meeting, or she could go to the August meeting and then you'd have more meetings before you did a recommendation.
okay. Well, I think that the site plan and the parking is something that should be worked out just so that you understand what the limitations are.
Yeah.
You know, it's an interesting lot because it doesn't circle the whole building. It's got a very tight parking lot on the, call it the right-hand side. But then there's a decent amount of area. It's a huge open curb cut basically, except
Yeah.
for that corner. So if there's a way to maybe organize that a little bit,
Yeah.
whether that's with just line striping in the beginning and then maybe landscaping down the line.
Something
At least the line
divide the road
striping,
from it.
it's almost reminiscent of like the Broken Inn when they had that corner with,
It is.
just the ghost lines and the striping can help,
Yeah.
so it doesn't become a free for all. As people come in, some people park the wrong way, or you got a couple demarcated spots and then people are perpendicular to that.
Yeah.
I think that'd be something useful for at least us to see.
Yeah.
Okay. Other than that, looks like a pretty straightforward tenant change. No expansion of the footprint, exterior lighting, no difference, upgrades, potential signage.
Yeah, signage, yes, lighting,
Okay.
as a business makes money.
All right, great. Okay. Again, we'll need a project lead for that as well.
Oh, I'd like to be the project lead.
Okay, there you go. Okay, Mr. Ang.
I know your property so well.
Bike racks, bike racks.
They have in that.
I bet,
big game,
yeah.
They have bike racks.
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah.
I know they did.
Okay. Great. So we'll see you at a forthcoming meeting. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so that concludes our discussion items. Moving on to reports.
I don't have anything to report unless you guys had any specific questions.
Questions for Laura Clark?
We won't see each other for like a month and a week or two though.
I just want to ask that everybody fill out the Safe on 7 survey if you've not done so already. And if you have any family, friends, neighbors, that you can also encourage to do so. It's open until Sunday, I think. the
Yeah, June
15th.
15th. Yeah.
But there's a push to kind of get a little more impact, especially if you have people that live in that kind of corridor or off that corridor, especially, it would be helpful to get their feedback.
Yeah. I know the survey is challenging.
It's not
The
great.
disappearing text is irksome.
Well, unfortunately, they did not make it really.
Super user
They
friendly.
They
Need to
didn't
be
make
that
it
way.
it's much easier to do on your computer. It's a lovely experience. It's really challenging to fill it out on your phone.
But the text disappears
Yeah.
because you write in your comments.
Mhm.
I wish I
I
have
wish I
passed
caught
on
that
to him.
sooner too.
Thank you. It did go out in the school email. I got that school email,
Good.
so it's out in the school email.
Yep.
And the Complete Streets Committee is hand delivering flyers all up and down Route
Oh,
7.
fabulous.
I got one. I did.
Oh,
get one.
Oh,
that's fabulous.
good.
And I have to say that despite the very more than prevalent police out there,
yeah.
presence out there, it continues to be in my entire life living in that house. The motorcycles and the speeding, so I just cringe because I'm waiting for the impact. Whenever and it's on at least 3 or 4 times a week for listening to that.
Yeah, so the
Never-
idea is because if you run that data, we really do have a constant police presence out there. But the idea is that kind of police presence is unsustainable. So the corridor is not reflecting like the needs of the community. And so this initial input is for existing conditions and just thoughts and things that you've experienced. Then they'll develop concepts that would theoretically transform that corridor so that it naturally slows people down. I mean, we can still have enforcement out there, obviously, always. But what we're trying to do is not make an enforcement issue, but create, a narrower visual corridor or whatever needs to happen to actually slow the cars down naturally.
It's just so dangerous.
Did you take the survey already?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did any of you watch the existing conditions summary video that they had?
Part of
I
it.
think I saw that.
Okay. So they also did a join at your own pace webinar and they go through the existing conditions and you can actually see what the speeding is on that road, how the volume compares to roads around us, where the hot spots are for us, crashes and things. They did a very robust existing conditions, which you could theoretically watch before the survey. But again, and Sarah said this at the meeting, like messaging and simplicity. I mean, I think we made it better, but still, obviously not everyone realizes that there's a join at your own pace webinar, but it's like 15 minutes long. I can send the link to you guys. It's really interesting.
It continues to be, not to go on about it, but my daughter was coming home from work yesterday and pulled into the median to turn into our side street and literally was watching another vehicle come barreling down the middle median at her and screeched to a halt in front of her. And she said, I had a panic attack and would not move. People are just becoming so much more boisterous and they just don't care. It's very scary. It's very scary.
I mean, that's what the research shows. The traffic volume has not changed. It's the driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which actually we have pretty good data as a result partially of COVID kind of changed people's driving behaviors.
For the worse.
For the worse, yeah.
There's national.
Yeah, I mean,
studies
it's
on
not
that,
just
right?
Niskuna that's occurred everywhere. Like,
And it's not just the people driving cars and SUVs and trucks. It's the bicyclists, the pedestrians, it's everybody.
yeah.
It's like, it was quiet for a while and everybody got in the habit of doing things they shouldn't.
So it's definitely an uptick in more aggressive driving and road rage and stuff since COVID. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Other
like-
commission business?
We got a bunch of people who want to play chicken one way or another.
You lose.
Any other commission business from the board? None? Okay, seeing none, a motion to adjourn? Moved by
Second.
Mr. Flom, second by Ms. Gold. All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 8:45 PM. Thank you, everyone.